Yeah, so I saw Michael Moore's movie, Planet of the Humans. It's a very interesting movie. I enjoyed it very much. It's a little over an hour long. It's not too long. Um, and one can see why it's very controversial. Michael Moore is often associated with the left. Michael Moore has not really taken on this before. I mean, he's done many other left wing causes, but I was kind of waiting for him to get around to an environmental movie, and so here it is. A person named Jeff Gibbs. I never heard of Jeff Gibbs. He's listed as the director and the writer, but it's Michael Moore through and through. Don't kid yourself. The style is Michael Moore. Michael Moore doesn't attempt to be fair. It's not a fair documentary. It's not intended to be a fair documentary. Um, it's a Michael Moore likes hypocrisy, and he likes to expose hypocrisy. Reminded me very much of a lot of the scenes that you saw from his other movies, like Fahrenheit 9/11. And of course, when a person is ambushed, they never come up with the right answers. They always come up with the wrong answers because people need time to think about what they're going to say. So this film goes through various forms of discussions, and as they interject themselves into various events, green energy type events, and exposes the hypocrisy of them. Um, I don't, you don't get the feeling that both sides have been treated fairly in this movie, but that's not really the intent, right? Um, One of the things that's obviously missing from this film is nuclear power. I mean, one would ask the question, why? Um, Most green energy schemes or projects are almost by definition inefficient. And these green energy options are all bad because they lack fuel density. The amount of fields that you would have to burn in terms of grass, or the amount of forests you'd have to cut for the amount of fuel that you would get, they're just not feasible. And we should know this up front. This is not rocket science. So there's always going to be toy money to play around with it and develop the technology. But the fact is, it's not a serious option. Wind also has some incredible limitations. These are physical limitations. These are the laws of physics. There's only so much wind. There's only so much energy in the wind. So, you can improve the technology, but you're not going to go far with that. So biomass, wind, solar, we're not going to go far with that. It's not going to get us very far. Dams are good. We've dammed up most of the rivers that could have enough kinetic energy to provide a lot of electricity. So, we're kind of running out of options. Most of these green energy schemes or ideas are designed to minimize the release of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. But of course, when you look at the end-to-end, the fuel cycle, many of these green schemes expend a lot of cost at other ends of the fuel
One
cycle.
of the most dangerous things right now is the illusion that alternative technologies like wind and solar are somehow different from fossil fuels. Well, I hear a lot of the times that solar cells are made out of sand.
Have you ever thought about solar panels? The main ingredient that makes them work is silicon or sand.
This is the raw material chips are made of, sand.
They don't use sand at all. So they use, I'll show you what they, so this is one of the ingredients. It's actually mined quartz.
Spruce Pine, North Carolina, regarded as the finest source of high-purity quartz in the world for semiconductor, solar, and communication applications.
But you can't use sand because sand has too many impurities. So you start with a very high quality quartz and a very high quality coal. And then you put those two together into an arc furnace and you melt them.
The quartz is then melted with coal in a large furnace at temperatures of up to 1,800 degrees.
So you need more coal to do that. So I get another coal out. So that's, when we melt these together, we get silicon metal and carbon dioxide. And the carbon dioxide just goes off and you got rid of the carbon, you're left with silicon metal. This is not clean coal.
Not clean coal.
So, this is sort of Michael Moore's stock and trade. It's not hard to find this kind of stuff. The reality is that most of these events, you're going to find hypocrisy through and through because they are by nature events set up to to try to sell their idea to the public. And of course, they shortcut things. They take shortcuts, and this, you know, he shows you some examples of doing that in the film. So the film is very interesting. I enjoyed the film. The obvious thing missing in the film is nuclear. Nuclear is the option for the future. I mean, that's obvious. Nuclear is the only way of getting the kind of energy density we're going to need. One of the major themes of this movie is about overconsumption, and overconsumption derives from overpopulation. So the movie makes that a major theme. So largely what's happening in the world is that, with the exception of Africa, population growth is really significantly turning down, and it is believed that with the exception of Africa, by the end of the 21st century, overpopulation won't be a significant problem. And it'll probably turn down in Africa too later on in the century as living standards rise. But the other implication is, of course, overconsumption. Somehow they envision a world where we consume less. Technology may have a lot to do with that. But the fact is that there's not going to be a major effort to reduce consumption. The fact is that technology is going to have to be the solution there. But that's an interesting point, an interesting point to think about. What it brings up, of course, is the question of the government's role. Because at the end of the day, it's not going to be free markets that determine these facts. Fuel energy, CO2 emitting fossil fuels, they're used very significantly still because they're very cheap, they're easy to access. So unless there is a social and a political will to maybe bend the cost curve a little bit to encourage alternative forms of energy, fuel is going to remain, fossil fuel is going to remain very significant part of the energy mix for years to come. But if there's a political need to get off it really quickly, then nuclear is the answer. And nuclear is going to need some significant investment. But we're on top of it. I mean, the technology's there. The uranium is there, the fuel is there, and there are many good ideas in nuclear technology. And I think one of the reasons why his film stays away from it is that it kind of would ruin his story. Because he's trying to tell a primary story, which is that overconsumption and overpopulation is the root of the problem. And in a sense, I sort of agree with him on that. I think that's common sense. The only question is, what are you going to do about it? I mean, who are you going to tell, who should leave the planet or who should not have children? I mean, this is a very difficult question. But, in principle, yeah, sort of, I agree with it. Too many people. And that would ruin his story to say, well, there is this option right around the corner called nuclear power. Because we definitely, they're absolutely right. We definitely have to get off of fossil fuels. The clock is ticking on that, and we have to get off that. I think the movie conflates a lot of different things. It first of all says that the real theme is that we're not going to fix the energy problem, or we're not going to fix climate change unless we reduce population and the population trajectory, and we reduce consumption. He offers that as the main theme of the movie. Then he turns around and says, oh, well, every opportunity to go green is really a failure. And of course, he doesn't consider nuclear. And maybe he deliberately stayed away from nuclear. The latest technology is nuclear, the fourth generation. There's research being done on those reactors. Within 10, 15, 20 years, nuclear is going to be the only solution to the power problem. There isn't going to be any other solution. There's not enough energy density in any of the other green options. You're never going to get the kind of energy density out of grass or forests, or capturing solar energy. Solar energy from the sun is restricted. You're going to need football fields worth of panels to generate very little electricity. And not to mention the problem of acquired batteries.
I decided to take him up on his offer to check out their football field-sized solar array right down the street.
What we're trying to do with this kind of a tour is get a sense for what they've already done as an indication of what we could do to push the envelope even further.
We took a hard look at wind and determined that, you know, around here there's not any real good wind coming through all the time. That's what we liked about solar. You would get the power when you most needed it. Pass these around, look at them. They are viable. Made in Michigan, that was another good thing. Although the efficiency of these panels is only about just under 8%. If you happen to be NASA and you happen to own a rover running around Mars, they have very efficient panels. But we can't afford those at about $1 million a square inch.
How many homes would this array provide electricity for?
The standard answer that we tell everybody is we're providing enough to meet the peak requirements of 50 homes. However, for most of the people that look at it a little bit closer, we generate about 64,000 kilowatt hours a year. Our average customer uses about 6,000 kilowatt hours a year. 6,000 into 64 is just a little over 10. We can meet the energy requirements for 10 homes over a year.
Will that be an incentive to put more solar on?
Well, if you wanted to make all of the energy required for the city of Lansing over a year,
well, how about
you'd have a solar array that was 3 miles by 5 miles.
Right, but
we're not going to do that.
But I mean.
So if you want massive energy and you want to solve the CO2 problem, nuclear is the only answer. And I'm kind of surprised the movie doesn't even touch on that. Maybe it's sort of an issue we'd want to deliberately to stay away from. Perhaps because so many environmentalists are now starting to embrace nuclear. Because faced with the choice of destroying the planet with CO2 and global warming and nuclear, I think they're coming around. A couple of things about the movie that I found very interesting. It brought to my attention, I hadn't noticed, but a lot of the green energy initiatives and a lot of the environmental initiatives are coming from billionaires, hobbyist billionaires, who in their hobby, you know, want to get involved in green energy. And they've supplied a lot of the money. And maybe I'll stay away from the word fraud. I won't call it a fraud, but it's not what it's made out to be. The economy, there's no economic justification for any of the green energy initiatives that are underway right now. They're either financed by billionaires, they're financed by foundations, or they're financed by governments. And when governments finance them, they finance them with a little bit of money, a little bit of toy money that is given to the Department of Energy or by Congress. And most countries are giving a little bit of toy money from the playground. This is not the kind of solution that is going to lead to fixing the energy crisis. The energy crisis is only going to be fixed by massive injections of investment into high technology and nuclear. And fission is the closest target, and fusion maybe several decades down the road. So that's it, that's a wrap. That's all really I got to say about this. It was a great movie, I recommend it for anyone. I have a feeling that a lot of people on the left are going to be saying a lot of bad things about Michael Moore. It took a lot of courage for Michael Moore to do this. You know, he's a left-wing person. He has left-wing bias, but at the end of the day, he's basically a decent and honest person. And when he sees hypocrisy on any side, he likes to expose it. So good on him. And that's all I got to say. Thanks for watching.